My father ordered, "Sign the estate to me, or you're no longer family." I said, "No." That night they kicked me out. Bye. Morning, a judge stood with me. Imagine inheriting $25 million overnight only to have your own family try to take it all away, revealing their real colors in the most surprising and tragic way possible. That's what happened to me, Claire, a 28-year-old kindergarten teacher living paycheck to paycheck only 6 weeks ago. My grandparents, Margaret and Victor, raised me more than my parents did. They were wealthy, but you'd never guess it. They taught me that character, integrity, and kindness are far more important than money. When they died in that awful vehicle accident, I was completely devastated. Losing them was like losing my entire universe. Then came the lawyer meeting where I discovered they had left me the full $25 million estate. Suddenly, the relatives, who had scarcely bothered to visit them in years, wanted everything, and I declined. Growing up, my parents, Thomas and Catherine, were physically there but emotionally absent. My father was a corporate climber, and my mother was a socialite. Family dinners were scarce and frequently interrupted by phone calls or party planning. There was no warmth and no leadership. However, my grandparents' humble 4-bedroom house was my true home. Despite their enormous fortune, they lived simply. Grandpa Victor taught me how to cultivate. Grandma Margaret taught me how to bake. And so, they attended every school play and soccer game that my parents had missed. They amassed their money from nothing. A modest logistics company began in their garage. By the time I was born, Whitmore Logistics was a regional powerhouse. Nonetheless, Grandpa drove the same pickup for 2 decades while Grandma clipped coupons. They always said to me, "Money is just a tool, Claire, not a measurement of your worth. Use it to build something meaningful, not to impress people who don't matter." This philosophy was precisely what caused the schism with my father. As their only son, he anticipated to inherit everything and live extravagantly. He despised their austerity, calling them stingy. They paid for his college, but he had to work summers. They assisted with a modest beginning home, not the fancy unit he desired. The final straw came when he wanted a top position in their organization despite having no prior experience. They refused, saying he needed to earn it. He stormed out, got a corporate job, and their relationship never recovered. For me, it was different. They paid for my schooling outright and encouraged me to pursue a career that I enjoyed rather than one that was profitable. When I decided to become a kindergarten teacher, they were ecstatic. Even though my salary was just above the minimum rate, we had weekly Sunday dinners. I assisted them with their smartphones, and they shared their experiences and recipes. During holidays, I always stayed with them, which irritated my mother, who interpreted it as a personal rejection. I lived in a small, pleasant 1-bedroom apartment and treasured my basic lifestyle. My grandparents respected that, even though they would frequently surprise me with practical gifts such as new winter tires. 6 weeks ago, everything changed. On a Tuesday evening, the cops called while I was grading papers. A drunken motorist, full speed. They died instantly. The officers said they did not suffer, but that provided little comfort. The funeral was a haze. My parents took charge, haggling about expenditures. My brother Jason was addicted to his phone. Linda, my aunt, sobbed excessively for photos before stopping as soon as the cameras were put away. Uncle Charlie simply hovered. Neither of them had seen my grandparents in years. Suddenly they were acting like a mourning family. I was numb. The 2 people who actually understood me had left. Their once warm home now stood empty. I couldn't bring myself to go in. I returned to my apartment, took bereavement leave, and attempted to digest this new dreadful reality. 2 weeks later, their attorney David Kaplan contacted. He invited me and my close family to his office for a reading of the will. I had no idea the meeting would challenge all I thought I understood about my family. The morning was dreary and drizzly, which suited my attitude. I came early, dressed casually, and holding the umbrella Grandma had demanded I keep in my car. David, a kind man in his 60 seconds, expressed his sympathy. He sincerely mourned. Margaret and Victor were extraordinary people, he stated. Quietly, the glass door flew open and my family entered. My father Thomas is inspecting his fancy watch. Catherine, my mother, carries a luxury handbag. My brother Jason swaggers in with sunglasses indoors as if he just rolled out of bed. Behind them, Aunt Linda was already moaning loudly on her phone, and Uncle Charlie was following her like a shadow. "Well, let's get this over," My father said without agreeing. Some of us have actual businesses to run, David said with a faint smile. Of course, Thomas, please follow me. The anxiety was palpable as we gathered around a massive oak table. My father snatched the head, asserting control. I choose a seat near David. Before we begin, David stated quietly, I'd like to clarify that Margaret and Victor were of sound mind when they updated their will. Last year, they were comprehensive in their thinking and explicit in their desires. My father sneered. Just read it, Matt. We know how it goes. Dad built the business. I'm his son. Standard inheritance procedure. David ignored him, opened a leather portfolio and began reading. The stiff, legal language dragged on. My family shifted impatiently. He finally arrived. At the section that everyone had been waiting for. We hereby bequeath our entire estate, including but not limited, to all cash assets, totaling approximately $8 million. Our investment portfolio valued at approximately $12 million. All real estate holdings, including our primary residence, valued at $5 million, and our 25% ownership. Stake in Whitmore Logistics, valued at approximately $1 million. To our beloved granddaughter Claire Murphy. The room was completely silent. I stopped breathing. I was confident I had misheard. He went on. We specifically and intentionally make no provisions for our son Thomas Murphy, our daughter-in-law, Catherine Murphy, our grandson Jason Murphy, our daughter Linda Monroe, or our son-in-law Charles Monroe, as we have provided for them during their lifetime and have made our reasons clear to our attorney. Let me see that, my father exclaimed, rising up and slamming his chair backward. He seized the document and scanned it quickly. My mother jumped in saying, This is ridiculous. Jason slammed his hand on the table. $25 million to a kindergarten teacher. She wouldn't know the first thing about managing that kind of money. What about me? I'm family too. I need startup capital for my business ventures. Aunt Linda rounded on me, her face flushed with rage. What did you do? How did you manipulate them into this? I sat there stunned, unable to comprehend what was going on. David gently retrieved the will. If you will all take your seats, there is more. He clicked a switch and the enormous screen on the wall lit up. My grandparents were seated side by side on their living room sofa, fully alive. My heart clenched. Grandpa Victor spoke. First, if you are watching this, it means we have passed on. We want to explain our decisions directly to prevent any misunderstandings. Grandma Margaret went on. Thomas, Linda, we love you as our children, but we have been deeply disappointed by the values you have embraced and passed on to your own children, with the exception of Claire. For decades, they explained, my father and aunt had prioritized material wealth over relationships, treating them as a resource rather than parents. They recalled years of missed family occasions, unpaid loans, and disdainful views toward their humble living. The business we built, says my grandfather, was never about amassing wealth for its own sake. It was about creating security for our family and opportunities for our employees. We built it through hard work, integrity, and treating people fairly. Mom said, Claire is the only one who has demonstrated these values consistently. She visits us not because she wants something, but because she genuinely cares. She has chosen a career helping children despite the low pay, because it fulfills her purpose, Grandpa went on. We trust Claire to be a good steward of what we have built. She will honor our legacy and use these resources wisely, not squander them on status symbols or get-rich schemes. The film continued with my grandparents expressing their wishes for how the inheritance may be used to benefit education and community development. As the television went black, my father exploded. This is absolute garbage. They were clearly senile. We'll contest this will. No judge will uphold this insanity. David stayed quite calm. They anticipated that response, Thomas. They underwent extensive cognitive testing before finalizing this will with multiple independent doctors certifying their competence. Additionally, they documented years of behaviors that informed their decision. I must advise you that contesting will be extremely difficult, expensive, and unlikely to succeed. My mother turned to me, her voice suddenly sweet. Honey, sweet Claire, darling, you understand this isn't right. Your grandparents were confused. This money belongs to the family, not just you. You'll share it with us, won't you? I felt like I was being bullied. All eyes are on me. I have to think about this, I mumbled. Jason scoffed. I had no idea they would do this. Think about it. There's nothing to think about. That money should be divided equally or managed by someone with actual business experience, my father said, referring to himself. As the discussion heated up, David softly touched my arm. You don't have to make any decisions today, Claire. My office will handle all immediate estate matters. He handed me a thick envelope containing documents, keys to their home, and contact information for their financial advisors. Call me anytime. The conference descended into turmoil after that, with threats of lawsuits and accusations flying. David eventually asked everybody to leave. As we exited, my father grabbed my arm firmly. This discussion is not over, he hissed. Come to our house tonight at 6. We will sort this out as a family. His tone made it plain that this was not a request. I nodded numbly, too overwhelmed to respond. As they drove away in their separate luxury automobiles, I sat in my 10-year-old sedan, clutching the envelope, wondering how an inheritance meant to be a blessing could so swiftly become a curse. I spent the afternoon driving, aimlessly, eventually stopping at a quiet park to collect my thoughts. The envelope remained unopened. A part of me wanted to go inside to grasp the gravity of what my grandparents had bestowed upon me. Another portion was intimidated by the responsibilities. At 5:45, I pulled into my folks' driveway. Everyone was already present. Their 5,000 QFT house, made of granite and glass, was built to impress rather than welcome guests. I took a big breath, grabbed the envelope, and went inside. They waited in the formal living room, which is rarely used. My father stood by the fireplace, a tumbler of scotch in hand. My mother sat in a luxury chair. Jason sprawled on the sofa, browsing through his phone. Aunt Linda paced uneasily. Uncle Charlie looked out the window, yearning to be somewhere else. Finally, when I arrived, my father said, "Sit down, Claire." I chose a chair near the door, suddenly realizing I might need to go quickly. "Let us be reasonable about this," he said, his business negotiation voice in full force. "Your grandparents were clearly not thinking clearly. They intended for the entire family to benefit, not just you." My mother agreed, eagerly. "Sweetheart, managing wealth is complicated. Your father has the experience to handle this properly. You can still get a nice portion, perhaps enough for a down payment on a real house instead of that apartment." The disdain made my skin crawl, but I remained silent. My father was emboldened and continued, "Here's what we propose. You sign over the estate to me as the financial head of the family. I will ensure everyone gets their fair share. You will receive 10%, which is more than generous considering your limited needs." 10%, I discovered my voice. That would still be over $2 million. "Exactly," Jason chimed in. "More than enough for a teacher. I need at least $5 million for my cryptocurrency exchange platform. It's going to be huge." I was suspicious when he said Jason had spent years bouncing between get-rich scams, never holding a job for more than 3 months. His previous idea, an app for looting public restrooms, failed after burning up $50,000 of my parents' money. "The house should go to us," Aunt Linda said. "We have 3 children to consider, and that neighborhood would provide them with better educational opportunities." I almost chuckled at the silliness. Aunt Linda had never visited my folks in the residence. Her kids were strangers. Their methods developed throughout the evening. When demands did not work, they resorted to guilt. "After all we have done for you," my mother replied, her eyes welling up, "we gave you life, a good home, and opportunities. How do you repay family loyalty?" I almost choked on my water. "Loyalty? When was the last time either of you called just to check on me? When did you ever attend one of my school performances?" My father adjusted his strategy yet again. "We are not asking, Claire. We are telling you what will happen. Either you sign the transfer documents voluntarily, or we will contest the will. We will bring up every questionable interaction you had with your grandparents. How often did you visit them alone? What did you tell them about us when we weren't there? It will get ugly." The threat was still present. I felt ill, but something within me stiffened. When I was 8 years old, my grandfather taught me to stand my ground during a playground dispute. "No one can take your dignity unless you give it away, Claire," he'd told her. "Know what is right and hold firm." Uncle Charlie, who had been silent, piped up. "Maybe we should all calm down and give Claire some time to think. This is a lot to process." My father rounded on him. "Stay out of this, Charlie. I am family," he said gently, but quickly backed away when my father stared at him. As the clock passed 9, Jason began composing transfer documentation on his laptop. My mother contacted their personal attorney for assistance on the phrasing. Aunt Linda looked through real estate ads for my grandparents' house, discussing which walls she would pull down first. They had already divided my wealth without my permission, planning how they would spend each dollar. No one mentioned my grandparents' wishes or legacy. They never asked what I believed the money should be used for. At 10:30 a.m., my father printed the crude transfer paper and passed it across the coffee table to me along with a pen. "Sign it," he commanded. Now I took up the paper and read it. The phrasing was broad, essentially giving up all rights to anything my grandparents had left me. In exchange, I would receive a portion, decided at my father's exclusive discretion. I put down the paper and took a big breath. "No," I said, my voice more steady than I had imagined. "I will not sign this or anything like it. My grandparents trusted me with their legacy for a reason. I intend to honor that trust." The noise in the room decreased. "What did you just say?" my father inquired, his tone dangerously low. I said no. My mother launched a diatribe against ingratitude. Jason called me names that I won't repeat. Aunt Linda began sobbing uncontrollably over her children's future. Throughout it all, I sat still, using the word no as a barrier. Finally, my father slammed his glass down so violently that it broke. "That is enough," he yelled. "I always told Dad you weren't to be trusted. You manipulated them just like you're trying to manipulate us now with this innocent act." He strode toward me, pointing his finger inches from my face. "You have a choice to make right now, Claire. Either you sign that paper and remain part of this family, or you take your precious inheritance and consider yourself disowned. You cannot have both." An ultimatum hovered in the air. I gazed around at their faces, looking for signs of affection or understanding. I found none. At that moment, I learned a horrible fact. They had never truly considered me family. I was only a means to an end, a potential source of income. "There's nothing more. I'm not signing," I stated firmly while rising up. "I'm sorry you feel this way, but I have to respect what Grandma and Grandpa wanted." "Then, get out of my house," my father yelled. "Pack your things and leave, tonight. You are no longer welcome here. I live in my own apartment," I reminded him. "I have for years." He laughed coldly. "The apartment we co-signed for because your teacher's salary couldn't qualify for the lease. Check your agreement, Claire. We own that building through one of our investment companies. Consider your lease terminated." My pants buckled. He was correct. When I couldn't qualify, they offered to assist. I never understood they owned the building through a shell corporation. "You have 30 minutes to pack essential items," my mother instructed, checking her watch. "The locks will be changed tomorrow." I stood transfixed in surprise. They were genuinely forcing me out, leaving me destitute for money they had never earned. "The clock is ticking," Jason said, smirking. "Better hurry, sis. Those $25 million won't keep you warm tonight. 30 minutes is a short time to pack your life." I moved on autopilot, gathering clothes, toiletries, crucial documents, and a few sentimental belongings. My head spun with astonishment. How might they accomplish this? How could money transform my family into total strangers? My father stood in the doorway of my old bedroom, arms crossed, monitoring me, like a prison guard, making sure no one stole anything. My mother remained downstairs, already on the phone with a real estate agent about selling my grandparents' home, her voice echoing up the stairs. "You were never really part of this family anyway," my father stated coldly as I packed things into a duffel bag. "Your mother and I were going to divorce before she got pregnant with you. You were the obligation that kept us together." The nonchalant brutality of his disclosure astounded me. I had always felt unwanted, but having it affirmed so bluntly, that was something else. "We have wasted enough time and money on you," my mother said, coming at the doorway. "Your private school tuition, braces, summer camps, all those dance lessons you were terrible at. Consider this the end of our investment. Savings, not love or care, but investment." As if I were a stock that had done poorly, Jason emerged next, leaning against the wall and wearing a smug smile. "You'll regret this when you have nothing and no one," he told me. "That money will run out faster than you think, and then what? You'll come crawling back, and we'll remember how you chose cash over family." I zipped up my final luggage and fought back tears. I wouldn't cry in front of them. I would not offer them satisfaction. "Is that everything?" my father demanded. I gazed around the room I'd had since childhood, despite the fact that I'd only been there on occasion since college. Ballet trophies, framed, diplomas, bookshelves, and photo albums, so much was left behind. I can come back. For the rest later, I told myself. My father laughed. There will be no later. Whatever you leave tonight goes to charity or the trash, your choice. The gravity of it hit me. They were utterly removing me from their lives because I refused to give them money they had not earned. I pulled my grandmother's quilt from the bed and jammed it into my already overflowing luggage. I would not leave it behind. I made my way downstairs, carrying 3 bags on my shoulders and another in my hand. Nobody offered to help. At the main door, I turned around one last time. My family formed a line, their faces set in rage, disappointment, and smug satisfaction. You might have money now, my mother stated, but family is forever. You'll realize what you've thrown away. I'm not the one throwing away family, I said quietly. You are. With that, I stepped out the door into the cool night air. The door slammed behind me with unsettling finality. Standing behind my car in the driveway, I suddenly felt the weight of everything come tumbling down. I was effectively homeless. My apartment was no longer mine. My family disowned me. In a matter of hours, I had acquired millions while losing the one support system I had ever known. Flawed as it was, I sat in my car and finally let the tears to fall. Great heaving sobs made my entire body quake. I sobbed for my grandparents, whose absence seemed more poignant than ever. I cried for the family I always wanted, but never had. Mostly, I sobbed for myself, lost in a world that had entirely transformed, after what seemed like hours, but was really just minutes. I dried my eyes and started the car. I had nowhere to go. Hotels required, credit cards with available limits, which I did not have. Friends were an option, but describing the issue seems impossible at nearly midnight. Then I remembered the envelope that David had given me. Pulling it out, I discovered a pair of keys with a familiar rabbit keychain, the keys to my grandparents' home, which was now unbelievably mine. The drive lasted 20 minutes. With each mile, I felt both drawn to the comfort of their home and afraid of entering it without them. I had avoided the house since the funeral, reluctant to confront the desolation. When I arrived, the porch light was already on, most likely due to a timer set by my grandfather. I sat on the driveway for a few minutes, gaining courage. Finally, I grabbed one suitcase and approached the front door, trembling the key in my palm. The house smelled precisely the same, a combination of my grandmother's lemon, verbena potpourri, and the wood polish my grandfather applied every Sunday. I turned on the lights, almost expecting to hear a greeting from the kitchen. The silence was terrible. I made my way to the guest room I'd always used, dropping my suitcase onto the bed. Everything was precisely how I had left it following my previous weekend visit a month before the accident. The novel I had been reading was still on the nightstand with a bookmark indicating my progress. My grandma had placed freshly folded towels on the dresser in anticipation of my upcoming stay. The thoughtfulness of it, the expectation of continuity that they had no idea would be disrupted, unnerved me once more. I sank onto the bed and cried until I was exhausted, then fell asleep completely clothed on top of the covers. The morning dawned with bewildering brilliance. For a moment I expected to smell coffee and hear my grandfather's off-key whistling. Reality struck back. They were gone, and I had inherited both their money and their enemies, all in the form of my own relatives. My phone had blown up overnight with texts and missed calls, the most of which came from my father and mother, swinging between threats and unexpected attempts at reconciliation. My mother's message read, "We can work this out if you are reasonable." My father was more direct. "You have 24 hours to reconsider before we file suit." Jason sent a single text. "Enjoying the big empty house? Not for long." That final one sent shivers down my spine. It sounded like a menace, not mere hyperbole. I forwarded it to David and he answered immediately, "Stay where you are. I will be there in 30 minutes. Do not open the door for anyone else." His eagerness startled me, but it also brought weird comfort. At least I had someone on my side. David arrived exactly 30 minutes later with a briefcase and 2 coffees. I ushered him into the kitchen. "First things first," he remarked as he handed me a coffee. "Your family has already contacted 3 different attorneys about contesting the will. I anticipated this and have prepared countermeasures." I curled my hands around the steaming cup. "They kicked me out last night. My father apparently owns my apartment building." David nodded sadly. Typical Thomas. Tactics, using leverage to force compliance. He began removing documents from his suitcase. "What he didn't tell you is that your grandparents provided for this exact scenario. He showed me a deed for a little cottage, 20 minutes outside of town. Your grandmother bought this property 5 years ago as an investment, but kept it in a separate trust for you. Thomas doesn't know about it. You have somewhere to go if you need it. It brought me comfort. At least I would not be homeless. But the thought of hiding out while my family surrounded me like vultures didn't set right. There's something else you should know, David added. You are not alone in this. Your grandparents had many loyal friends and associates who understood the situation with your family. As if on cue, a knock came from the back door. David smiled. That would be Miguel. Miguel. The name sounded strangely familiar. Miguel Alvarez. David said, he has been your grandparents' estate manager and handyman for 15 years. He lives in the guest house at the back of the property. I opened the door to discover a man in his early 50s with salt and pepper hair and pleasant eyes. He held his hat politely. Miss Claire, he gently continued, I am very sorry about your grandparents. They were wonderful people. I saw your car this morning and wanted to check if you needed anything. The simple kindness almost moved me to tears again. Thank you, Miguel. I am a little overwhelmed, to be honest. Miguel nodded. Mr. Victor and Mrs. Margaret worried about that. They asked me to look after you if anything happened to them. The house, the grounds, everything is maintained. I have been keeping watch. David asked Miguel to join us. Miguel spent the next hour telling me stories about my grandparents that I'd never heard before, building a picture of two individuals who were respected and adored by those who worked for them, not just their entitled family. Your father and brother, Miguel explained gently. They came here after the funeral when no one was around. They took things, watches, jewelry, some electronics. I have it all on the security cameras. My stomach constricted. My father had constructed a comprehensive security system for my grandparents years ago, ostensibly for their protection. I'd forgotten about the cameras. Miguel shook his head sadly. They did not know. Mr. Victor had me update the system last year. He did not trust the old one your father put in. Said it had too many blind spots. David made a note. That footage could be useful if they pursue legal action. There is more, Miguel added. Mrs. Margaret kept detailed journals. She documented everything, especially family visits and interactions. They are in her study. I followed Miguel into my grandmother's little study. A built-in bookcase had dozens of leather-bound journals, all neatly dated. Miguel plucked one off the shelf and handed it to me. This one mentions when your father asked for money last year, he claimed, for some investment opportunity. I opened journal and immediately recognized my grandmother's exquisite handwriting. On May 15th, Thomas paid us a visit for the first time in 7 months. He didn't ask about our health or lives, but instead launched into a pitch for a cryptocurrency investment that required $250,000. When Victor refused, Thomas became hostile, accusing us of preferring Claire and saying we were naive to trust her when she only visits to secure her inheritance. Claire has never asked for money, has no idea of our net worth, and brings food every Sunday. I read entry after entry, each describing years of identical interactions. My father demanded money. My brother is suggesting ludicrous business concepts. My mother made carefully veiled remarks about how their humble living was embarrassing to her social status. In contrast, my trips were portrayed with genuine warmth. My grandma noted the tiny gifts I brought, the chats we had, and the assistance I offered around the house. She noticed me, in a way that my parents never did. As I was reading, the doorbell rang. Miguel went to answer it, and he returned with an elderly woman dressed in a sensible dress and cardigan. Helen Porter, he introduced her. Your grandparents' housekeeper for 20 years. Helen held me close. You look just like Margaret when she was young. She said she was so proud of you. Over the next few hours, additional individuals arrived, including Isabel Cruz, my grandparents' business partner, who knew all about Whitmore logistics and promised to guide me. Victor Desai, their investment advisor, provided comprehensive portfolios. Anna Mitchell, a 30-year neighbor, brought a homemade casserole and stories about neighborhood get-togethers. Each person brought both information and real affection. They had all adored my grandparents and by extension cared for me. While rummaging through my grandmother's desk, Helen discovered a hidden compartment with letters from my father spanning decades. Each sought money, with some making thinly veiled threats to cut off access to me if they refused. She also kept this, Helen explained, handing me a USB disk. Security footage from after the funeral. Your mother was going through Margaret's jewelry before the reception even ended. She took several valuable pieces, claiming Margaret would have wanted her to have them. My grandparents seem to have been chronicling my family's conduct for years. Perhaps they knew this day would come, so they built not only a financial safety net for me, but also a network of support and evidence to preserve their interests. My phone rang at 4 p.m. as David was walking me through the difficult financial documents. A text from Jason. Hope you are enjoying Grandma and Grandpa's house while you can. Dad, Mom, Aunt Linda, Uncle Charlie and I are.